Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. So, I just watched The Gentleman. Let's talk about it. So The Gentleman is the Netflix series adaptation of the 2019 movie of the same name that was directed by Guy Ritchie. Yes, Guy Ritchie has decided to take a break from his very busy schedule in order to circle back and re-explore the world of The Gentleman, which to me makes absolute sense considering the fact that the 2019 film was one of the very best movies that Guy Ritchie has produced in recent years, and in fact ever. I absolutely loved that film, and some of you guys would even recall that I reviewed it 4-5 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long already. But if you do want to hear my thoughts on the 2019 movie, you can go ahead and check out my review on my channel. Though be warned, it is very old. But the point is, I was a really big fan of this film. Some of you will know that I'm actually a big fan of Guy Ritchie as a director overall. I think he's really underrated. I love his kind of British working class sensibilities, even though he's a long way from working class himself at this point. But I love the fact that he leans into that, the Cockneyisms, the East London-isms in his work. I think it's really cool and fun and refreshing. And overall, I tend to really enjoy his projects. So at least I did at the point where The Gentleman came out. But then soon after the release of that film, we started to get bombarded with Guy Ritchie projects. He seems to be hard at work with project after project these days. I mean, if you take a look at his filmography, a lot of it has come from the last 5 years. And so, yeah, he's a really busy man and not necessarily pumping out a lot of great content, in my opinion. So I was really excited to see him circle back to the world of The Gentleman, which, like I said, that was one of the best worlds that he has created in a while. So clearly the stakes are pretty high for me as a fan of the original film, but how did the series measure up? Well, we're going to discuss in today's video, but before we dive into all of that good stuff, as per usual, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Now, without further ado, guys, let's get into this. So like I said, The Gentleman Netflix series is set in the same world as the 2019 movie. And for those of you who don't know or need a recap, the 2019 movie was all about the world of aristocracy and how some aristocrats who are stuck in these huge, massive, formerly lavish buildings, manors and mansions from the 17th to 18th century, from the slave days, from slavery, okay, and beyond that, some of them aren't able to afford the upkeep of these huge properties. They're not able to afford that aristocratic lifestyle in the 21st century anymore. And so here comes Matthew McConaughey. Cue in Matthew McConaughey, who has this extremely lucrative weed business that spans across the UK and primarily targets these aristocrats who are sitting on acres and acres of free land that he can use in order to grow his product, and they can benefit from because he will pay them a chunk of money to do so. And when it comes to the series, unfortunately, we don't have the return of any of the original characters from the film, which I think is a bit of a shame. I at least wanted a little cheeky cameo from Charlie Hunnam or something. Like, give us something, okay? It's not like he's too busy to be doing this. But alas, they decided to go for a whole new cast and a whole new bunch of characters, which turned out to work out pretty well, which I'll discuss in a minute. But this time around, the focus is on a brand new character, Edward, or Eddie, who's portrayed by Theo J. Let me not, it's too early to thirst, okay? But he's actually a soldier. No, in fact, he's actually a captain. And when we're first introduced to him, he is working on the Syrian border, helping people pass. And he seems to be a really kind of nice, calm, level-headed person that many people in his troop, in his company, what are soldier groups called? I don't know. I don't know. But many people around him seem to respect him and look up to him as a leader. But soon after we're introduced to the character in Syria, he is promptly called back to the UK upon hearing news that his father is really unwell and is currently on his deathbed. Now, his father is a duke. He is the owner of all this vast property and land that has been held in their family for generations upon generations and centuries upon centuries. But soon after Eddie returns home, his father passes away, and then we get the will reading, which is where things get interesting, because Eddie is a second-born son. He's not the firstborn son. This is giving me Kendall Roy vibes. He's not the firstborn son. It's actually his brother, Fredwood. Freddie, who is the firstborn son. But Freddie is how do I put this politely? A fuck up. Freddie is a mess. Like, Freddie is just, you know, struggling with addiction, partying, making poor decisions, and he seems to have done so for a very long time. He's needed his family, particularly his younger brother, to support him and get him out of mess, get him out of trouble, and we see that continues to be a recurring theme throughout the series. And so even though Freddie fully expects to inherit all of the land, you know, all of the property, all of the titles that come with his family and his father's death, it turns out that his father did have an inkling that wouldn't be the best of ideas, and decided to pass everything down to his second son instead, making Edward the next Duke of wherever the hell, and making him the sole heir of, you know, all of the property and land and everything. Now, that all comes with a lot of responsibility and burden, as Edward soon finds out, because his family aren't doing particularly well financially, despite all of the aristocratic privileges that they have. But then he soon learns that his father was already onto something before he passed away, because it turns out that his father was having some dealings with the Glass family, which is a notorious criminal family that deal in weed. Yes, his father was a part of this aristocratic network of weed growers that span across the UK, and so they were earning millions upon millions in revenue for just allowing the Glass family to do their thing on their vast land. Now, Eddie learns about all of this when he gets a visit from Susie Glass, who is brilliantly portrayed by Kea Scodelario, but she comes to pay him a visit promptly after his father passes away in order to get him up to speed with what's been going on, because she doesn't think that a change in regime needs to mean a change in her business plan. So she's like, let me get this guy up to speed so he understands what's what, because we ain't going nowhere. And so he learns that his family has been, unbeknownst to him, a part of this criminal network, and he is under strict instruction to keep things going, you know, business as usual. Because the head honcho of the Glass gang, Bobby Glass, who is portrayed by Ray Winstone, is actually in prison. I don't know what kind of prison he's at. He seems to be in some kind of sanctuary, actually. He seems to be in some kind of retreat. But Bobby Glass is technically incarcerated, so he's not really on the ground during these dealings, and that's why everything is up to his daughter, Susie, who strikes up a new working relationship with Edward. And at first, Eddie is disorientated. At first, he's like, oh, I can't believe my father was a part of this criminal underworld, because you see, Eddie, he's a self-righteous man. He's a good man, respectable. As I said, he was working in the Syrian border and he seemed to be really nice. And so at first it was just all too much for him, and all he wanted to do was get out. All of his dealings with Susie at first were about him trying to leave this network. He was like, listen, I'll do whatever you say. I'll do whatever you ask, just as long as by the end of the year the contract is not renewed. And Susie's like, oh yeah, for sure. Like, Susie's like, oh yeah, definitely, for sure. Like, you just do this little thing and then you're out. Like, by the end of the year, you won't even have to worry about us. You won't even have to look at my face ever again. Meanwhile, she knows full well that her father has instructed her that no such thing will ever happen, because as the time goes on, Eddie proves himself to be increasingly helpful and beneficial to their business. So Eddie kind of shoots himself in the foot, because as he works hard to get out of this contract, he continues to prove just how valuable he is. Although Although as time goes on and these dealings continue and Eddie's skills increase and his business savvy, his knowledge starts to become more elevated and on it, you start to wonder if Eddie wants to leave this operation at all, until the very end where it becomes clear that he absolutely does not, and maybe he's more cut out for the criminal underworld than he ever thought he was. And so therein lies the story of The Gentleman, the spin-off of the 2019 movie. And when it comes to my thoughts on this series overall, I have to say I was kind of living. I was kind of having a great time. I think this was a really great series. Now, I was skeptical because, like I said, I was a bit disappointed to hear that none of the original cast from the film would be returning for this TV series spin-off. But I do think that the new cast, the brand new bunch of characters that we got in this series, were compelling and fun and interesting enough for me to get invested in them just as much as I was with the cast of the film. Now, first thing to note when it comes to the series is that you don't actually need to have watched the film in order for the series to make sense to you. Although I would highly recommend you check out the movie, okay? But if you really don't want to, for whatever reason, if you want to go against my advice, then you can go straight to watching this series. And I think you will have just as much of a good understanding of what's going on here, because it does a really good job of adhering to that premise that the film had and setting up the world of, you know, these UK aristocrats that are living in these grand mansions that are deteriorating around them, and so they need that extra source of income. And, you know, here comes the criminal underworld trying to take advantage of the vast land that they have in order to grow their produce. And in the meantime, the aristocrats can siphon some of that money and fund their expensive lifestyles that they're born into. Now, I would say that overall the story here is very simple. It's nothing revolutionary, nothing that we haven't seen before, but it's all in the execution. Like I said, the characters are really compelling, very well portrayed by the actors as well, which we'll discuss in a second. But there's just enough there to make it feel special. And not to mention, you have the Guy Ritchie-isms, you have the Cockney accents, you have the blood, the violence, the slow motion, like all of those classic Guy Ritchie-isms that just make his films feel, just have that flavor, or at least the best of his films, because recently it's been a bit, I think less is more when it comes to Guy Ritchie, and someone needs to tell him that, because he has like 5 different projects coming out in the next 2 years, so like he needs to slow down. But listen, who am I to stop his bag, okay? But all of those assets in this series combined make up for a pretty simple premise, so it is a really engaging watch from start to finish. Now, this series clearly explores the sort of downturn, the corruption of this initially level-headed, calm, relatively peaceful, well-mannered man who's just minding his business. He didn't even think that he was going to inherit all of this stuff. He didn't think he'd have the title or the properties or the land, because he's the second-born child. And as his brother Freddie very immaturely shouts, he is the firstborn. He's the firstborn son, and so he's the one that's supposed to inherit everything. But because of Freddie's past mistakes and mishaps, their father identified Eddie as the more suitable heir, and so all of this lands on his lap. But at first it really seems like he does want to get out of the situation as quickly as possible, and that's why he's going along with it. But then you start to see how he becomes corrupted, how he starts to enjoy some of these criminal activities, and how well he starts to work with Susie. I mean, their father wasn't kidding when he said that they make a really great team, because they do, okay? You do see how both of them working together really advances the business. They both have great ideas to contribute. And so at the end, when they decide to put their differences to the side and actually both come together as business partners in order to throw their hand at taking over the business, I thought that was just a natural turn for both of these characters, but especially for Eddie. I think it was a really impressive arc that they took him on. It was very slow and very gradual, which I think worked. But all of a sudden you started to see, like I said, this very well-mannered, calm, level-headed man turn even more maniacal, even more evil and violent and calculated. And by the end, he throws in his hat to become a kingpin himself. And it just absolutely makes sense considering the journey that the character went on. And one of the compelling overarching themes of the Gentleman franchise is the dichotomy that's explored between these like criminal underworld families like the Glass family from the series versus the kind of landed gentry, the aristocracy like Eddie's family. And at first when you're presented with these two groups and these two families, you think that they're polar opposites, but then as time goes on you start to realize that they have more in common than you may think. Well, you may think. I already knew that they had more in common, okay, because of colonization, okay. But I was really happy to see that kind of explored. The idea that these aristocratic families are just as criminal as the Glasses, but it just so happens that they committed all of their criminal acts hundreds of years ago when they stole a bunch of land, you know, in the time of William the Conqueror or whatever. And so they're in the clear now, you know, all of their successors get to enjoy the fruits of their ancestors' labor, but it doesn't change the fact that these two groups have far more in common than initially thought. And that is brilliantly articulated by Giancarlo Esposito's Stanley Johnston, who is an outsider kind of looking in. He's an intelligent, highfalutin villain who is technically new money, but has great admiration for old money, these old aristocratic families that have had power and money running through their veins for generations. And so he looks upon them with a sense of jealousy and he wants to have some of that for himself. And that's one of the reasons why he's chasing after Eddie's property so hard near the beginning of the series. Although he also has ulterior motives because he wants to replicate the Glass's business model this time around for his business, which is centered on something that is considerably more serious in the form of meth production. Story-wise, when it comes to having this juxtaposition between these contrasting classes, I think that's a really clever commentary and theme to have running across the Gentleman franchise. Now, when it comes to the cast and characters of the series, I found myself enjoying them far more than I thought I would. Like I said, I was pretty disappointed that we didn't even get a cameo from the cast of the original film, but putting that to the side, I think this cast of characters did a really great job in, you know, giving us a bunch of new characters to get excited about. First of all, we have Theo James as Eddie, the brand new Duke. I thought he was great. Again, he did a really great job of selling this idea that he was just really calm, level-headed, just a regular old guy with good morals, with a good sense of morality, who very slowly but surely started to become corrupted by the world of the Glass family. But perhaps his criminal intuition was something he always had in him. Perhaps it was running through his veins as an inheritance from his criminal ancestors. I think Theo James did a good job of conveying the arc that his character went through. His performance isn't flashy, isn't bombastic. He kind of acts as more of a straight man to the craziness that's going on around him, especially within his family. And I think that works just fine. And not to mention, in every scene that he was in, he looked damn good, okay? We'll just leave it at that. Let's minimize the thirst for today, please. An even bigger standout from the series, in my opinion, was Eddie's partner in crime, Susie Glass, portrayed by Kea Scardelario. I think she did a great job portraying this character. She was super sincere and on the money, like she knows this business. Her father has been in prison for a while now. So she's been running the show and she's been doing a heck of a job of it. They're making billions per year. So she is very serious about her business. But I like the fact that there was levels to the character. Like she wasn't always at an 11 when it came to the violence and brutality. Usually she tended to match Eddie when it came to his level-headedness and calm. It was only when her business or her reputation or her family was threatened that she had to, you know, kick it up a notch when it came to the violence and brutality and remind people that a Glass was still in control. So yeah, Kea Scodelario absolutely knocked it out of the park when it came to portraying all of the different sides of this character. And she and Theo James had great on-screen chemistry together. It was just enough. There was just enough there for me to be like, oh, like, are they gonna, like, are they gonna, oh, like, are they, aren't they, what's gonna happen here? But I think for the most part, it actually worked as them just being business partners slash almost friends. Like, I would be satisfied. I would be satisfied if they never kissed. Like, I would be satisfied if they were just business partners slash teetering on friendship. Again, their chemistry was solid enough that if they did make that romantic turn, it would absolutely make sense. But it didn't feel like it was strictly necessary, which I found to be quite refreshing, actually. And this is coming from someone who loves to ship everyone and everything. This time around, I'm like, friends? Okay, cool, I believe you. But as great as these two leads are, it also helps that they're surrounded by a great supporting cast. You have Daniel Ings, who's fabulous as Freddie, who is literally a lunatic, literally crazy, full of bad ideas, and is desperate to be the Kendall Roy of the family, the firstborn son, okay? But then you also have Jeff, who's portrayed by Vinnie Jones. I love Jeff. I just wanted nothing but the best for Jeff, especially when it came to his little storyline where it turned out he had a not-so-secret affair with Lady Sabrina. I thought all of that was really fun as a sort of CDE plotline. And then, of course, we have Giancarlo Esposito portraying Stanley Johnston with a T. He does a really great job portraying one of the many different villains on the show. Although I do think it's a shame that Giancarlo Esposito has been pigeonholed into this kind of villainous role for many, many projects, but he does do a really great job each and every time, so like, how can I hate? So overall, I really had a fun time with The Gentleman. I thought it was a worthy TV show adaptation of the 2019 film that I absolutely loved, and I'm relieved to say that even though the new characters had me a little bit anxious at first, I ended up really enjoying them, and I would happily go back and revisit them in a season 2 of the show if we get one, which, considering its popularity, at least here in the UK, we might just do. If I had any critiques of this series, it would be that whilst I very much enjoyed it and I do think it is a worthy spin-off of the film, it doesn't quite match up to the movie, in my opinion. Okay, it's still not quite on the level of the film, and I think that's largely because this is a sort of toned down version of the movie. You know, all of the crazy things that happen in this series, the kooky characters like Freddie in his chicken suits, like all of the kooky and crazy moments from the show are still nothing compared to how crazy, frenetic and bombastic the original film was. I feel like they kind of toned it down a little bit, which I think is a bit of a shame, because that's where all of the best Guy Ritchie-isms really shine. It's in the quirkiness and kookiness and the wacky storytelling devices that they use, and we don't really get a lot of that in this TV series adaptation. So yeah, unfortunately, we may have yet another example of the Netflixification of a director's vision. This is something that I mentioned when I talked about David Fincher's The Killer, which also had that sort of flatness to it. Considering his other bodies of work, you wouldn't expect that from him, but like I said, it feels like the sort of Netflixification of these directors. It feels like when these directors team up with the Netflix crew, you get a sort of ironed out version of their vision and directorial style, which I think is a bit of a shame. And so guys, with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving The Gentleman an 8 out of 10. So that's it from me. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on The Gentleman, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this series down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.